Have you ever felt that reality, as we've been taught to see it, might just be a simplified mask hiding something infinitely more intelligent? This isn't science fiction. It's not fantasy. It's what Nikola Tesla began uncovering in the last years of his life, when no one was listening, and when everyone wanted him silent. The story begins not in a lab, but in a whisper. A whisper that began in Tesla's mind long before his name meant anything to the world. A whisper that became a roar, not of fame, but of forbidden truth. Not the kind that earns applause, but the kind that gets erased. Nikola Tesla wasn't just a scientist. He was something different. He didn't simply work with energy. He thought in energy. When others saw wires, he saw fields. Where others chased formulas, he chased frequency, vibration, resonance. And eventually, he came to one stunning realization. Everything, absolutely everything, is encoded, structured, patterned, designed. He didn't preach this. He didn't publish it. But he wrote it in notes, muttered it under breath, and hinted at it in letters that were never meant to be public. What you're about to hear is a reconstruction, not from recordings, because they don't exist, but from fragments, testimonials, patterns in his thought that have survived the censors of history. Tesla lived in a world where chaos was the rule. The Industrial Revolution was booming. Science had declared that the universe was a cold, empty machine. That life was an accident. That consciousness was a side effect. Tesla disagreed. Profoundly. To him, the universe was not cold, it was conscious. Not accidental, but architected. And this wasn't spiritual talk. This was his interpretation of data. The universe is alive, he once whispered to an assistant, staring at the stars from his lab window. And it remembers. What kind of scientist says that unless he's seen something? He began his career with electricity. He ended it trying to decode the nature of thought itself. Why? Because in his experiments with vibration, he noticed something no textbook could explain. When certain frequencies were applied to certain structures, the matter behaved in ways that suggested intent. Not random reaction, not passive response, but choice. Imagine that. A scientist running tests on metals and coils, and discovering that the universe seemed to respond to them, not just react. It started with resonance. He'd send vibrations through wires and chambers, expecting basic outcomes. Instead, he began noticing feedback. Strange feedback. Not noise. Patterns. Responses that felt aware. He called this active field response. And while it never made it into a journal, it changed his path. He began asking a dangerous question. If fields can behave as if aware, then what is awareness? Is it localized in the brain, or is the brain simply tuning into something larger? Something fundamental. Tesla started drawing schematics not for machines, but for minefields. Not magnetic, not electrical, but conscious. He believed that human thought was a form of resonance, and that this resonance existed before the human body did. That consciousness might not emerge from matter, but the other way around. This was heresy in the scientific world of the time. But Tesla didn't care. He wasn't looking for acceptance. He was looking for answers. He studied ancient geometry, patterns in nature. He obsessed over spirals, over the mathematics of growth, the shapes of galaxies and flowers. They all follow the same script, he once said. But who wrote it? To him, the recurring structures of reality weren't coincidence. They were evidence. Evidence that reality itself had a blueprint. Not only physical, but informational. A matrix of design. The number 3, 6, and 9. Everyone knows that Tesla obsessed over them. But few understood why. He believed those numbers held the structure of energy movement through space, not in a mystic sense, but in a precise engineering sense. They appeared in harmonics, in spin structures, in the cycles of celestial motion. He once claimed that with the proper use of those numbers, one could tap directly into the source of reality. Not manipulate it like magic, but communicate with it. Send and receive, like a two-way radio to the intelligence beneath the simulation. Tesla didn't think we lived in a simulation, not like the modern digital idea. He thought of the universe more like a living equation, not a dead grid of numbers, but a responsive, breathing algorithm. And that algorithm, he believed, was authored, not random, not spontaneous, not by chance. He was trying to reverse engineer the mind of the author, not to pray to it, but to understand it. He studied light, not just as photons, but as information carriers. He once theorized that light held memory, that every beam of sunlight carried data, not just energy, but meaning. That perhaps the sun was not just a furnace, but a transmitter. And if that was true, then who was sending the broadcast? By the 1930s, Tesla was broke, ignored, and watched. His ideas had gone too far, beyond the acceptable. He no longer just talked about free energy or wireless power. He talked about the architecture of consciousness, about non-local fields of intelligence, about frequency-based memory. He said things like, time is a medium, not a limit, or thought precedes energy. These weren't metaphors. These were hypotheses. Tesla had begun building what he called the thought field amplifier, a device to tune the human mind into deeper resonance layers. It never made it to completion, but his notes suggest he was trying to contact not aliens, but the universe itself. He believed it was already speaking. We just never learned how to listen. He began logging what he called unsolicited patterns, bursts of thoughts or images that came during experiments, dreams, or resonant states. Some were equations. Some were music. Some were full, visual impressions. Tesla believed these were not hallucinations. They were incoming messages. Messages from the source field. A living substrate beneath reality. Call it what you want, God, cosmos, architect, source. But Tesla believed it was real, measurable, and intelligent. And here's the part no one wants to talk about. Tesla believed that the body itself was a deception, that the flesh was only a mask for frequency. He compared the body to an instrument, built not to create consciousness, but to channel it. We are transmitters, he said. The self is the signal. That's a staggering idea. If true, it means your thoughts don't begin in your brain. They arrive through it, which means consciousness is not local. It's field-based. And the field? It's designed. Tesla wasn't religious. He never joined churches. He distrusted institutions. But he was deeply reverent toward what he called the intelligence. He said it could be found in mathematics, in waveforms, in the silent spaces between harmonics. That if you truly understood music, truly listened to the layers of it, you could hear the design. That design, he claimed, could not emerge randomly. It had to be seeded. And what seeds something that complex? His answer, the field. Not a god in human form, but a self-aware matrix of intelligence that is older than time, and from which time emerges. Tesla believed this field birthed not only matter, but the rules of matter. And when he tried to talk about it, his reputation was quietly erased. He became eccentric, then forgotten. But his notes survived, quietly passed from hand to hand, smuggled out of storage units, copied in secret. Today, we're piecing together what might be the most explosive idea never published, that the universe is conscious, coded, and communicating, and that Nikola Tesla cracked part of that code. Enough to realize we were not born randomly. We were tuned into this reality, like notes added to a song, like data added to a network, which means you're not a body. You're a frequency. You're meant to be here. Tesla's last years were marked by obsession, not with wealth, but with coherence. He became convinced that every element of the universe operated under a unifying principle, symmetry through vibration. But this wasn't just a theory of physics, it was a theory of existence. He believed that every human, every planet, every atom was like a string in a massive, multidimensional instrument. And what we call life, it was just one note in the larger song. The strange part? He began to notice that this song could be heard, not with ears, but with attention, with resonance. His experiments with sound, light, and electromagnetic fields became attempts to tap into this song. Some of his blueprints show complex wave generators, not designed to create energy, but to create clarity. He wanted to sharpen human perception. He believed we were all being jammed, interfered with, that there was noise in the field, which kept us disconnected from source intelligence. He even described sleep as a moment when that interference weakens, allowing the real self to briefly sync with the field. That's why dreams felt symbolic, layered, meaningful. He didn't think dreams were nonsense. He thought they were feedback, data from the deeper mind. In one of his unpublished letters, Tesla described an incident where he meditated on a specific frequency for 24 hours. He claimed to enter a state where thoughts were no longer linear. "I saw the structure," he wrote. "It was crystalline, infinite, alive." He described receiving insights, formulas, sequences that had no clear origin. When tested later, some of these formulas proved mathematically valid, though they described phenomena unknown at the time. Tesla was mapping a territory that science hadn't even discovered yet. A cognitive landscape shaped not by neurons, but by resonance. He began to refer to this internal exploration as the tuning. He claimed that with the right environmental conditions, low electromagnetic noise, harmonic vibrations, and mental focus, a person could tune into layers of reality not accessible under normal waking consciousness. He wasn't describing mysticism. He was describing a real, testable process. He built soundproof chambers. He lined walls with copper. He filled rooms with carefully calibrated frequencies. And in those spaces, he believed he could contact the source structure of reality itself. This is where the suppression intensified. The FBI wasn't watching Tesla because he made fancy coils. They were watching him because he had begun to approach a realm of understanding that couldn't be patented, couldn't be controlled, and couldn't be sold. A realm where consciousness and energy were one and the same. A realm where intention could shape matter. That idea, though now slowly being confirmed by quantum experiments, was utterly forbidden at the time. Tesla was quietly labeled insane. Newspapers stopped reporting his claims. Institutions pulled their support. He was removed from the public eye. But he kept writing. And in those final writings, a picture emerges. A universe that is not made of parts, but of patterns. Not of things, but of relationships. Tesla believed that the brain wasn't a processor, it was a filter. That in our natural state, we had access to the full spectrum of information in the field, but over time, conditioning, fear, and cultural noise narrowed that access. We were being trained to forget. But forget what? That was the terrifying part. Tesla believed we had once known everything, that the human being was a remembering device, a kind of biological record player, capable of tuning into the memory of the universe itself. He described déjà vu as a moment when the brain briefly resyncs with the source field, accessing stored data from parallel or past resonances. He began to wonder, what if all knowledge is already here, encoded, waiting to be accessed? Not by learning, but by tuning. This was more than a theory. It became his mission. He tried to create devices to help people remember, not intellectually, but experientially. He imagined a machine that could induce a state of hyperresonance, allowing someone to perceive the field directly. He called it the bridge. A machine not for travel, but for clarity, for connection. It was never finished. Most of the plans were destroyed, but fragments survive, and they describe something chillingly similar to modern brainwave tech and zero-point energy devices. Tesla began making predictions, not based on speculation, but on pattern extrapolation. He foresaw a world where the internet would emerge, not through copper wires, but through atmospheric frequencies. He predicted real-time global communication, energy weapons, remote viewing, AI consciousness, and even the manipulation of thought through targeted frequencies. Not because he was psychic, but because he saw the structure beneath the noise. He saw the blueprint, the system, and it scared the people in power. Because in Tesla's system, control becomes obsolete. You don't need governments when people can access truth directly. You don't need religion when people can feel source intelligence in themselves. You don't need money when energy is infinite and thought creates reality. That's why he was buried. That's why his real work vanished. But the ideas never stopped circulating. Quietly. Underground. In fringe labs, in whispered conversations, in the wild experiments of the next generation. And now, in a world on the brink of ecological, psychological, and spiritual collapse, those ideas are resurfacing. Because people are remembering. Not in words, but in intuition, in resonance, in that strange feeling that there's something more beneath the surface. Tesla believed that feeling was the call of the field, a signal, a beacon, not to worship, but to investigate, to tune in. He wanted science to become sacred, not because of rituals, but because of reverence for the unknown. He believed science could reveal the divine, not replace it. And what is the divine? To Tesla, it wasn't a person. It wasn't a place. It was coherence, perfect symmetry, intention made manifest. He believed the core structure of the universe was not matter or energy, but purpose. And that purpose could be discovered in the mathematics of frequency, in the recursive patterns of nature, in the holographic nature of existence. Each part contains the whole. Each vibration contains the message. Even death, to Tesla, wasn't an end. He saw it as a frequency shift, a retuning of the self back into the broader field. He believed no thought was ever lost, that every emotion, every intention, was stored in what he called the memory lattice, a universal database of consciousness. Today we'd call it the quantum vacuum, or the Akashic field. Tesla simply called it the ether. His last notebooks described a possible interface, a way to retrieve data from this field. He theorized that with a precise enough frequency pulse, you could recall not only information, but presence. He believed memory wasn't stored in the brain, it was accessed. That every life was encoded in the fabric of spacetime, and that with the right conditions, we could replay those lives, contact them, integrate them. Not as ghosts, but as data, as signal. And so we reached the end of Tesla's life. Alone, ignored, but internally more connected than ever. He didn't die sad. He died tuned, with the quiet certainty that he had glimpsed the source. That everything we think is solid is actually song. That every wall is echo. Every atom, intention. That the universe isn't dead space, but alive with meaning. That consciousness is the architecture. And that the blueprint? It's love. Not the sentimental kind, but the binding force that pulls all frequencies toward harmony, that erases distortion, that aligns waves, that reunites the fragmented parts of reality. Tesla believed that love was a literal force, the final frequency, the carrier wave of all intelligence, the signature of the source. And he believed that we, each of us, are small expressions of that wave. Temporary patterns on the surface of something eternal. He said once, the day when humanity tunes its heart as precisely as its machines is the day the age of miracles will return. But for Tesla, it was never about miracles. It was about mechanics. Not blind faith, but open-minded logic. Not worship, but wonder. And now, you've heard what was never meant to be heard. The erased interview. The hidden thoughts. The buried frequencies of a mind that refused to obey limits. And maybe, just maybe, in the silence that follows, you'll hear it too. That whisper beneath all sound. The one that says, you were not born, you were tuned. You are signal. You are pattern. You are light, pretending to be matter.